The morning I drove up to my quiet lake lot, I expected peace, the kind of stillness that makes you feel small but safe. The sound of water brushing the shore and the pine trees whispering like old friends. But what I found instead nearly made me spill my coffee. A massive white RV was sitting dead center on my property. Lawn chairs, grill, clothesline. The whole setup, like someone had decided my land was their personal resort. And standing beside it, sipping iced coffee, with that queen of the world look, was the woman who would soon turn my life upside down, the president of the Lakeside HOA, Linda Walker. When I asked what she thought she was doing, she smirked and said, "This is community space. HOA says I can park anywhere on unoccupied land." I told her calmly, "This isn't unoccupied land, it's mine, paid for, deed and all." She laughed, actually laughed, and said, "Oh, so you think you can hoard the best view of the lake for yourself? That's not how we do things around here." Then she slammed the RV door in my face. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a squatter. This was an HOA Karen with a clipboard in one hand and a god complex in the other. I'd bought that land years ago, back when this whole lakeside area was still just forest and dirt trails. No HOA, no rules, just me and the water. I'd built the dock myself, set up a fire pit, planted wildflowers. Every inch of that land had sweat and memory in it. So seeing that RV parked there like a middle finger, it made something in me snap. Still, I tried to play it cool. I told her she had until sundown to move that thing before I called the sheriff. She smirked again, said, "You wouldn't dare," and turned away. But I would. Oh, I absolutely would. That afternoon, I drove straight to the HOA office, a squat beige building at the front of the community, with one of those fake, cheerful slogans on the door, "Maintaining harmony for all." The woman at the desk had that sugary tone only people with power over paperwork have. "Can I help you?" "Yeah," I said. "You can start by explaining why there's an RV parked on my private property and why your HOA thinks it has a say in it." She blinked like I'd spoken another language. "If you're referring to the temporary use policy, it applies to all open spaces." "This isn't an open space," I snapped. "Lot 47 by the lake. I own it. Here's the deed." Her smile faltered. "Well, you'll have to take it up with the board." "Trust me," I said. "I will." When I got back, Linda was lounging by my dock in a beach chair, music playing, pretending she couldn't see me. I gave her one last warning. "Move that RV or I'll tow it myself." She tilted her sunglasses, gave me a grin that could sour milk, and said, "Try me, cowboy." So I did. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept picturing her on my property, her smug face, her damn iced coffee, the HOA acting like it owned the whole lake. I wanted to march over there and drag her out myself. But I knew better. People like her thrive on drama. You can't fight them with emotion. You beat them with facts. So the next morning, I called my old lawyer, Mark. Mark was an old school guy, the kind who didn't waste time. After I told him everything, he said, "Ethan, if your property predates the HOA and you never signed into it, they've got no legal authority. You can have her removed." That was all I needed to hear. I drove back to the HOA office, this time straight to the top. I demanded to see the president, not Linda, but the actual board head, a guy named Alan. When he finally appeared, he had that salesman smile you see on people who practice fake sincerity in the mirror. "Mr. Cole, I'm sure we can find a peaceful resolution," he said. "Peaceful resolution?" I barked. "You let one of your board members camp on my property. She's trespassing." Alan tried to smooth it over. Our policy allows residents to use undeveloped lots for recreational, not owned lots. I cut in. This isn't your HOA's playground. Here's my deed. Here's my survey. You're out of line. His jaw tightened. Perhaps there's been a misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, I said. Fix it today, or the sheriff will. To his credit, Alan drove out with me that afternoon. Linda was still there, sunbathing like nothing was wrong. Linda, he started carefully, I reviewed the records. This property does belong to Mr. Cole. You'll need to move the RV. She sat up fast, sunglasses sliding down her nose. You're joking. You said we could use empty lots. Alan hesitated, then shook his head. Not this one. Her face turned red. You're siding with him? He's harassing me. I folded my arms. You've got until tomorrow. Then the tow truck's coming. She glared at me with pure hatred before storming into the RV. I could hear drawers slamming. I knew she'd fight back, but I was done playing nice. That night, I went through every document I had. The purchase deed, tax records, survey maps, laid them all across my kitchen table. Every line said the same thing. That land was mine. I even stopped by the county clerk's office the next morning, got an official statement confirming that the HOA had zero jurisdiction. When I returned to the lake, she was sitting on the RV steps, still smug. I handed her the paperwork. You've got 24 hours. After that, this gets towed, legally. She laughed, called me a bully, said the HOA would handle me, but I could see it in her eyes, the first flicker of doubt. I went home, called my buddy Hank, runs the biggest tow service in the county. Got yourself one of those HOA tyrants, huh? He chuckled. Don't worry, I'll bring the big rig. Do it by the book, I said. The sheriff's already on standby. Next morning, before sunrise, I was waiting. I hadn't slept again. I was exhausted, frustrated, and honestly, a little unsure. For a minute, I wondered if maybe I'd gone too far. Maybe I should have just let her stay a weekend, avoid the mess. But then I pictured her laughing, claiming my property as hers, and that hesitation vanished. No one steals peace from you and gets rewarded for it. The rumble of Hank's tow truck echoed down the dirt road. Linda burst out of her RV, waving her arms. You can't do this. This is illegal. Hank didn't even blink. Sheriff's department signed off. Ma'am. I stayed calm, hands in my pockets. You've had your warnings, Linda. She screamed that she'd sue, that her husband knew people, that the HOA would bury me. I just nodded toward the RV. Then you better start digging deep, because this is leaving my property one way or another. When the chains hooked under her RV and the winch began pulling, she froze, her mouth open, no sound coming out. Watching that machine haul her fortress off my land was the most satisfying sight I'd had in years. She stood there, shaking with fury, muttering, You'll regret this. Maybe, I thought, but not today. I figured that'd be the end of it. I underestimated her. The next morning, I drove back and found her standing on my property again, this time without the RV, but with backup, her husband and half the HOA board. They were shouting about community fairness, accusing me of theft. I stayed calm, though my pulse was hammering. This isn't your community. This is my land. That's when a sheriff's cruiser rolled up, right on cue. Deputy Miller stepped out, cool as ever, and asked what was going on. Linda jumped in first. This man stole my RV. I handed Miller the paperwork. Deed, survey, court notice, the works. He read them, nodded, and said, Ma'am, you were trespassing. The tow was lawful. If you don't leave now, I'll issue a citation. You could have heard a pin drop. Linda's face turned crimson. Her husband sputtered about unfairness. But no one cared. Even the HOA president looked embarrassed. I stepped closer, my voice steady but low. Let me make this real clear. Step foot on my property again, and you'll be facing charges. Are we clear? Linda glared, trembling, but didn't say a word. She turned and walked off, head down. The rest followed like scolded school kids. For the first time in Maze, the air felt still again. But I knew better. People like her don't fade quietly. Sure enough, a week later, my lawyer Mark called. She's threatening to sue. I laughed. She's welcome to try, Mark said. We can do better. File for damages, towing costs, harassment, restraining order. Make it official. So we did, in court. Linda showed up alone, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. She tried to argue that the HOA gave her permission. Mark calmly laid out everything, my deed, the sheriff's report, the HOA apology letter. The judge barely needed 10 minutes. Ms. Walker, you are liable for trespassing and associated costs. Her jaw dropped. This isn't fair. The judge had already moved on to the next case. When we stepped outside, Mark patted my shoulder. That's how you deal with bullies, legally, not emotionally. I nodded. Yeah, it feels damn good, doesn't it? A few days later, a check arrived in the mail, reimbursement for towing and the fine. I didn't cash it right away. I left it on my counter for a while, just to look at it. Proof that justice can come slow. But it comes. That weekend, I drove back to the lake. The lot was empty again, just wind, water, and the sound of ducks drifting near the dock. I fixed a few boards, stacked some firewood, and finally breathed easy. For the first time in weeks. I could hear silence again, the kind that feels earned, as the sun dropped behind the trees. I stood on that dock and thought about everything that had happened. People like Linda think they can take whatever they want, your land, your peace, your dignity, because they've got titles and rules. But all it takes is one person willing to stand firm, to say no and mean it. That day, I didn't just win my land back. I won back something bigger. The reminder that decency still beats arrogance, and that the law, when used right, can silence even the loudest Karen. Lesson learned. When someone tries to take what's yours, stay calm, stay smart, and stand your ground, because the truth doesn't need to shout to win.